Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Ryan K, Stephen P, Gilmer, Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Matt aka Stormageddon, and Mr. Biscuits have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, I thought vampires sucked blood. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode, it is on the Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. Joining me today to discuss souls, and well, actually, you know what? He is the gaming prophet, which we should all pray for our gaming souls, or to the gaming gods. I'm losing the thread of my analogy here, but joining me, the gaming prophet himself, Kade from the Gaming Memories podcast. Kade, how are you doing today?
I'm here to call the brethren and sisters unto repentance.
Razael. It actually kind of fits in with something like that like your gaming gods shtick kind of would fit in with the world of Legacy of Kain a little bit.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a while. I think the last time you were on was for the original Medal of Honor.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was Medal of Honor, which I don't know how long ago that was, but it's been a minute.
I think it was last year, I want to say. And actually, listeners, you will hear another episode on Medal of Honor in a few weeks, not with Kade. I apologize, Kade. That'll be for Punch a Nazi Month coming up very soon. But anyway, we're here to talk about Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, which is the second game in the Kain Soul Reaver series, as it were. They kind of it's kind of interchangeable, I guess. It's all part of the Legacy of Kain series, I guess, technically. But like they're different. Sorry, what?
I think. Oh, you're right. So I think the Legacy of Kain series, and then they have the Blood Omen. So the first game was Blood Omen. They called
Blood
it
Omen Legacy of Kain.
Yes.
The second game, this one that we're talking about, is Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. Then they did Soul Reaver 2 in 2001, Blood Omen 2 in 2002, and Legacy of Kain Defiance in 2003. Yes. And then there has not been another game in the series for 21 years until Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver Remastered. Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered came out just last year.
I know it's a little bit of a diversion, but have you seen the canceled Xbox 360 footage of the Soul Reaver game that got canceled?
No, I did not. I also heard there was like are you thinking of the Nosgoth, or are you thinking of a different one? Because there's been a handful of Legacy of Kain games that got canceled.
I'm gonna look it up real quick. You can edit it down. Be sure.
Well, while you're looking up, there was another one. It was going to be called Nosgoth, and it was like an arena shooter or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't that one. It was Xbox Legacy of Kain Dead Sun.
Okay.
And it looked so awesome. Like got canceled, but there's like a tech demo that like floated around, and then I tried to track it down and play it. Couldn't find it, but I found a couple different playthroughs of someone who's gotten a hold of the demo, and it looks pretty cool.
You could probably check out there's I mean, I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but the YouTube channel NoClip did a great documentary on the Legacy of Kain remasters. They talk about the history as well, but they also have a whole segment of the documentary devoted to the community, where they talk about stuff like this and the community's efforts to dive into the games. And so I'm sure
it's probably in there.
Yeah, I'm sure you could probably find something on, like, I just don't remember any of the people's names, but I'm sure you could find something on in that segment. And side note, that NoClip documentary is fantastic. It's definitely worth watching. It's about an hour long, And I watched most of it. I just wanted to get the history part, like some of the history of the game and the development of this. But before we talk about the history and before we go into the game in earnest, I want to get your personal experience with this, Cade. You know, like where did you first play Soul Reaver? And normally I would when we're talking about our personal experiences, I give it to the guest first. But as it's been the case with the last couple episodes, I've been going with mine first because mine's very boring. I never even played a Legacy of Kain game before playing it for this episode, and I should also disclose I did receive a review copy of this from Sandbox Strategies. Shout out to Sandbox! Thank you so much for sending me a review code to try out this remaster. And both Kate and I played the remasters for this, so my experience was just that, playing this remaster. And another disclosure, and I'll explain why as we get into the gameplay and more of the conversation. I did not beat this game for one reason or another, and I'll explain more as to why I never finished it. But that's my experience. That's where I'm going to cap off my spot with my section here on my experience. I want to throw it over to you, Cade. What's your personal experience with this? You know, how did you first kind of get into this game or the Legacy of Kain series? You can feel free to go off on all of it.
The original Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, I never played. It was rated M for mature, and I had a strict household. But
I can understand that.
I'd always look at it at Blockbuster and read the back cover of the game over and over. And if I could get, a hold of information about it in a Game Pro or a PSM. So I was aware of the series. The first game wasn't huge hype, but it just looked cool and bloody and adult. And PlayStation at that time definitely was the edgier console.
Mm-hmm.
You had Resident Evil and all these games that I couldn't play or I wasn't supposed to play, but I would find them at friends' houses or whatnot. And then Soul Reaver came out, and I think I got a little bit older and my parents pulled back, were a little bit more lax. I don't remember like how close to launch I got it, but it was pretty close. I remember reading a lot of the marketing hype building up to that game. It was featured in a couple of magazines. I had multiple subscriptions growing up, and every time I'd go to the gas or the grocery store, I'd want to go shopping with my mom because I would just go to the magazine section and read like 2 or 3 gaming magazines cover to cover while she shopped. I would like every single like caption under every single picture. I would just whatever I could get my hands on. And during the marketing buildup for this game, I remember, maybe it's because it stood out to me, but I remember being very hyped, and the hype was big, particularly them touting the no loading screens thing and the spectral shift. That was marketed prior to the game coming out as part of the technical differentiation with why you should be interested in this game. Obviously, the art style, vampires and being dark and gritty, that kind of stuff's always stood out to me. And I ended up getting it. And the opening cutscene for this game is one of the best opening cutscenes of any game to this date. The visual quality is definitely degraded over time. It's not in high resolution. The remasters they're not even like good AI upscales. You can actually get a proper AI upscale of this cutscene on Nexus Mods for the PC version of the remaster, and it's done pretty well. But the opening cutscene where Raziel shows his wings to Kain, and Kain is mad about it and rips the wings off and shoves him down into the abyss. Just that opening scene. I mean, this was the age where a lot of the times you were playing a JRPG or you're playing a game in anticipation for the CG sections because they were so mind blowing at the time.
Yeah.
Now they're not. It's like really, really hard to convey what it was like, say, playing Final Fantasy 7, 8, or 9, and you play through a story section and then you get to one of those cutscenes.
Yeah.
And those cutscenes were just mind blowing. Well, this cutscene for Legacy of Kain, it was like, oh my God, this is better than some of the JRPG stuff. The visuals looked so good for the time. And especially the facial animation on both Raziel and Kain, not a whole lot is said in that opening scene, but a lot of communication happens with their facial expression and their body language. And I think for the time, it's still good it's like okay by today's standards, but it was very good at the time. And then just again, playing the game, it was, I mentioned this during the intro. I've heard this game later in my life described as Ocarina of Time for the PlayStation. I don't think that's a perfect analogy, and it didn't capture me. I wasn't obsessed with this as much as I was Ocarina of Time, but it did scratch a similar itch in some regards, and I thought the aesthetic and art style was way cooler. I've always been
Hmm.
attracted to like dark gothic stuff. So um, absolutely loved the game when it came out. I thought it was awesome that you, instead of sucking blood, you ate souls.
Yeah.
I thought that was heavy metal. Like it took it up a notch.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I don't just suck blood. I eat your soul. Like freaking Shao Kahn and not
What are you
Shao
gonna do
Kahn,
now,
Shang Tsung
motherfucker?
in Mortal Kombat. Your soul is mine.
Maybe that should have been the fucking clip instead of the joke. That who knows,
Yeah, you could.
listeners, when you're listening to this, maybe it's going to be Shao Kahn, maybe it's going to be what I actually
Yeah.
said.
Maybe
You'll
you edit
only
back
you
back
will
back
know.
in. I mean, you have the power of editing. You can do whatever
I
you want.
do.
So long story short, got the game pretty early on. Big fan of it. Played Soul Reaver 2 and Defiance. And then later in my life, I went through a couple different phases where I would go down the Reddit and different like game board rabbit hole, because the entire series has a very intertwined plot and it involves time
Hmm.
travel. And I've gone through a couple phases where I went down the rabbit hole, people giving their explanations and interpretations of the whole plot for the series. And it's been a while since I've gone down that rabbit hole, but the last time wasn't that long ago, a few years ago. And I found this site. It's just like a fan site that went through the entire series in chronological order and explained how all the time travel worked. And it seemed at the time that this was a series that tackled time travel and didn't create a ton of paradoxes. There's always a
Oh,
few, and Amy Henning has talked about one in Soul Reaver 2, I think. I forget which one, where she's admitted that it's an oversight, but fans have kind of retconned and figured out a way to explain it. All to say, I just think the series as a whole, um, there's a reason why it's a cult classic, but we'll get into the downsides, which is I don't think any of the games play as a game particularly well. They're
uh,
passable.
yes. Yeah, okay. I need to get this off my chest right now. Then, I was not a fan of this game. That's why I did not beat it. I tried. I got about I would say 2/3 of the way through the game. I made it up to the 8th section, the Drowned Abbey. But I think what frustrates me about this is that there is a lot of amazing, inventive, and fun ideas in this game, and they are all marred by really clunky controls. I don't want to say they're bad,
No, they're
but
bad.
it may actually, the controls aren't bad. It's the physics. Excuse me. The physics are very clunky. I don't know. I never felt like I was 100% in charge of Kane's or Raziel's movement, and the his jumps were very stiff and stilted. It honestly, you know what it kind of reminds me of? Sora's jump from Kingdom Hearts 1.
Hmm.
Like where it's this really kind of goofy step almost. And Kingdom Hearts, it doesn't bother me as much because they kind of designed the limited times you do have to platform. They kind of design it around Sora's shitty jump. Like I'm not going to deny it's a bad jump, and maybe nostalgia does play a little bit into it. But I never had as much of an issue with Sora's jumping in that as I did with Raziel's, where there's a lot of sections that require pinpoint accuracy with, I shouldn't say pinpoint, but very like hyper precise controls on your platform. Specifically, I don't remember the section, but there's a moment where you have to like climb up this side, and there are rafters that you have to jump across. You climb up the side of a wall in a room. Then you have to jump across the rafters above the room, and then get to the hallways on the left, to get to a hallway on the left side of it, in the upper left side of the room. And you have to jump from platform to platform. But because Raziel's jump is so clunky and so awkward and handles so stiffly, it you fall down almost every time, and then you have to shift into the spectral plane to go back up. And I will go into what the spectral plane is and all that is in just a moment. Reshift back, jump across, because I think actually I guess you technically don't have to shift back, but I think you need to be in the normal, like the real world existence to, I don't remember anymore. But this game has a lot of great ideas, and it's just marred by there's two flaws. The one is the physics, like I mentioned. The other, I think the level design, like the layout of the world, is just not good. I I I don't, and I think it's partially me though, but I think what I my issue with it is that it's hard to know where you're going and where you need to go. They do have a fast travel system which works pretty well. Um and I don't hate it, and I was having a hard time figuring out where I needed to go. And even if I knew where I had to go, then you were marred by the clunky physics when you had these tricky platforming segments. So I I actually have a lot of positive things to say about this game, but I need to get out those quick negative things because they've been eating up my like my emotions for the last like however many weeks since I decided to call it quits on this. In fact, I posted on Blue Sky about how I don't like this game, and I'm pretty sure I I got blocked by somebody for it, even though I wasn't talking to them. Uh, I'm dead serious. So there's an app that you can find called Clear Sky that allows you to see all the starter packs you're a part of, and actually who is blocking you. And so I saw someone who's blocking me. I'm like, I've never interacted with this person, and if they don't have their account protected, you can, like, meaning marked as like, there's a setting you can have where basically Clear Sky can't view your Blue Sky posts. Um, but this person didn't have it on, so I looked at their profile and said, like, Legacy of Kain fan. I'm like, oh, I think they must have just blocked me because I had one mean post about how I just didn't like it.
Welcome to the internet, dude.
I wasn't offended. I was like, you know what? If I'm harshing your buzz and you're a huge Legacy of Kain fan, it's fine. I'm not taking it personally. I get it. If so, I did not beat the game because I genuinely did not have a good time with it. With that said, I am surprisingly able to separate my experience with it from all the good stuff that I do see in this game, even if I didn't necessarily enjoy how they like presented it or executed it, if that makes sense.
Makes 100% sense. The game is clunky. I have more issues with the combat than the platforming,
Oh
but
my god, yeah.
and I agree. It's the physics and the hit detection and
Mm-hmm.
the control. It's awkward and clunky, and that's one of the things I thought was going to be refined with the remaster, because the remaster, in my opinion, it's almost it's almost schizophrenic, because aspects of the remaster are extremely high quality and they put a lot of work in, particularly the textures and the models.
Hmm.
They did a really, really good
It looks
job.
really good.
It looks really, really good, and you can switch on the fly between original graphics and remastered graphics, just like the Command and Conquer series, um, for the models. And
Hmm.
certain aspects of it, like, really feel they put a lot of manual, tender love and care to bring this title to the modern era. And so it's more than a port. Sometimes a remaster, they'll market something as a remaster, but really it's a port,
Hmm.
and it supports modern resolutions and 16:9, and that's it. It's bare bones. They just, like, get it up and running for modern hardware.
Yeah.
And it's a remaster because you can run it in higher resolution now. Okay, like, you can basically do that in emulators for most games. That's the bare bones remaster, and then you have remasters that are sort of in the middle, and that's where I feel Legacy of Kain is, where they improve some things, but it's still under the hood this game that is 20, 30 years old. And Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, came out at a time when we hadn't modernized third person controls and
Yeah.
camera movement. And yes, they added a third person camera control to the remaster, but the game's original camera is programming is still there. So it's like you have the original camera, but then you can also move on your right stick, and sometimes those compete. I ran into the same problem with Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, the
Mm.
recent remaster. They so yeah, same exact issue. You can now control the game with the traditional third-person right stick, but the game was initially designed with set cameras, and the camera would move for you, and you just played
Hmm.
the action. And those sometimes like battle each other, and it's a weird. It's like it feels for a moment. Oh, this controls similar to a modern third-person control scheme, and then the camera starts moving on its own because you round the corner and it's programmed to go a certain way. I ran into that with the remaster, and I also felt the environments did not get the same love visually that
Mm.
the models did. They look, I would guess it's just AI texture upscaling, and that's it. Um, for the most part. And they didn't increase the fog distance, which makes very little sense to me.
I think
And
that's also part of the aesthetic of the game, though. Some like so I don't mind them increasing. Like I think it's smart to keep the fog distance the same because if you're playing, excuse me, because you want to remember what the original was like to an extent, but like with modern niceties, I think that's okay because the game's still designed around that limitation. But I can understand maybe like if you do it, let me put it this way, maybe if they did it with the nicer graphics, like the up, not just the upscaled graphics, but like the nice HD textures they put on, maybe get rid of it for that and then keep it on for like the original version.
or just do actual fog, not like the
Mm,
old school fog. Silent Hill 2 absolutely had fog, but it looked really cool in the remake, Silent Hill 2 remake. And it kept the same draw distance, but it was artistic and the fog was done really, really well, and it swirled. And this just has the original fade in, basically draw distance fog. And I just felt like you could either spruce it up or give us the option to see a little bit farther, or put in actual volumetric fog in the game, because it's almost, I get the sense that they wanted to do more with the remaster and they ran out of money and time.
mm,
And they just like, okay, well, I think they wanted to do the whole game at the same quality that they did all the characters in Raziel, because all the like they don't just have better textures; they're new models.
yeah,
They made new models for all the enemies, all the bosses.
the
So
bosses look amazing too.
yes, so that is like halfway. When you make new models and new textures, for that part of the game, you're moving more towards a remake than a remaster. You're remaking assets.
If they did run out of time, that almost is eerily parallel to what happened with
The end of the
Soul
game.
Reaver.
Yes.
Yeah, because in the development of the game, they actually a lot of it was cut and ended up getting added on to Soul Reaver 2. But they ran out of time before they could implement everything they wanted to. There was also, I remember in the documentary, the one guy talked about how they wanted this whole underground city, but they couldn't. The PS1 literally was not powerful enough to render it, so you could only render one half of the city at a time. So always one half of the city was going to be shrouded in fog, and the other half was going to be shrouded in fog. So like you could never see the whole thing all at once. So it kind of was like they're like, why even bother doing that then if the if the player is not even going to be able to feel like they're in a city,
Yeah.
which I totally get. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll go into more behind the scenes stuff later on, but I cut you off. We're talking about the remastering they did.
I just think it's a tale of two levels of effort. It's the controls, the physics, the environment textures feel as if they are a bare bones remaster. They just port it, get it working, support high resolution, and that's it. And then
Hmm.
there's other aspects of the game, the models and the textures, that are more than just a remaster. They're pushing the line of what I would consider a remake, because you're remaking aspects of the game from the ground up.
Hmm.
And I've noticed that where they're in this remasters and remakes, there is this gray area. For example, Suikoden 1 and 2 remasters just came out. They remade the background textures and the spell effects and redid the translation, but all the original sprites are the same. The game plays exactly the same. There's not any extra content, so it's marketed as a remaster, but there's parts of it that are a little remake-ish, but just like very, very little. Or the other end of the spectrum, would be Star Ocean Second Story R, where they literally rebuilt the whole game. There's all new assets for everything, world maps, city maps, town maps, all in 3D, new pixel artwork, but it was done in a way to feel and look the same as the original. And so you get a full-on remake, but it kind of feels as if it's a remaster because they did such a good job at maintaining the vibe and the aesthetic and the feel of the original game. And then
Mm.
at the farthest end of the spectrum, what most people consider a remake would be like your Final Fantasy VII remake, where it's just a full-on
It's a
new game,
completely,
a complete new thing.
yeah.
And so Soul Reaver to me felt as if it, as Soul Reaver remaster, felt to me as it had a bit of an identity crisis on what they were trying, the scale and the quality they were trying to accomplish,
Mhm.
and it felt unfinished.
I could see that. I could see that. I mean, I don't have a lot to compare it to because I never played the original one. I will say, and speaking of this remake, my one big criticism of the remake itself, not of the game, I actually don't blame the game for this. It had a very negative impact on my playing of the game, but once again, I don't blame the actual game for this. This remake is too goddamn dark. You can't fucking see shit, dude. Oh my god. I remember I was trying. Okay, so the first boss, the very first boss. Let me look up his name really quick because I cannot remember it. I found it. The very first boss. Their name is Melkia, and it is. It's this. The arena for this boss is like it is an arena. It's a circle with a big cage in the center. And spoiler alert for how you beat this boss. But what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to like this boss is kind of like it's not fully corporeal, like it can go through the center ring, like the big cage that I was talking about. And what you're supposed to do is bring it over to, there's these two gates on the left and right side of this arena, and you're supposed to go to the over to the other side of them, open the gate up, and that way when the boss comes in, you drop the gate on them and it takes them out, like it does damage, right? So that's how you're supposed to do it. Maybe I can't remember if they're corporeal, and I could have sworn they could go through the fence for some reason. In any case, that's how you're supposed to beat the boss, right? The way you get to the other side of the gates of the fucking portcullis that the gate is in, there's actually a gap on the above the left and right side of it in the wall, so you can do a high jump, get up over it, go to the other side, open up the gate, and wait for the boss. In the remake, you can't fucking see those openings. It's just black. So I'm running around trying to figure out, like, I'm trying to do attacks. I'm trying to find any way I can to fucking attack this boss. And I'm not doing any damage. I'm getting hit a whole bunch of times. I'm like, okay, do I have to go into the astral plane or the spiritual plane, whatever the hell, and do something in there? Fucking no, you don't do any of it. You have to jump up and do, get the other side of this portcullis gate and open it up and drop it on him. And I was so mad because I'm like, how the fuck was I supposed to figure that out if I couldn't see it? And it just, it drove me up a wall. There was so many times playing this game that I would be downstairs with my family and they were watching me get upset because I couldn't see where I was going. It was so dim. If you were in the spirit plane, you could, but if you were in the regular plane, you couldn't. And I guess just because we keep talking about this and I'm doing a bad job of like explaining the gameplay, just a real brief overview for the listeners who may not have played this game. One of the cool things about this game, and I do genuinely think this is cool, is that since you are this like vampire that has been sent to hell, but then you're like resurrected, and we'll explain more about that in terms of the story in a moment, you can go back and forth between the spiritual plane and the like corporeal world, right? Corporeal plane or whatever you want to call it. And if you're in the spiritual plane, then the geography, the geometry of the world changes. So you actually are supposed to switch back and forth to solve puzzles that way. It's a really cool mechanic and idea. I don't think it's always executed well, but I like the idea and what they were going for. And so when I was in this boss fight, I was trying to do that and it didn't work. And I might have been able to see it because the only times I could actually really see anything well was when I was in the spiritual realm, the spiritual plane. The only time in general that I could actually fucking see what I needed to do was I told my wife, I'm like, give me 5 minutes. I'm going to go upstairs, turn off all the lights in my office, and just sit down on the floor and see if I can see. And that was the first time I could actually see what the fuck I was doing in some spots. Oh, I was so mad, dude. I was so goddamn mad. And that's not the game's fault. Like, it definitely impacted my enjoyment of it. That is a problem with the remake. And as much as I thought they did a great job with the textures and like especially the HD, like the new character models and the textures and all this other stuff, that is the only real criticism I have of this port. Like I of this not this port, sorry, this remaster is that I couldn't see anything. And I when I was talking to some other friends in our community about it, someone mentioned to me that yeah, that's a fans of the series have been complaining about that. They've been hoping for a patch that will fix that. Because I also heard apparently in this remake they added a day and night cycle. I don't know if that was in the original game or not. Do you know?
Yes. So, yes, it was. But
Okay.
I don't know if it was cycled or it was just preset at certain
Mm.
events. This scene would be lit for night. I don't know if it was a proper day and night cycle. Um, I did run into this. I don't know why people in the forums or Soul Reaver fans don't just go and adjust the brightness setting because I did have to turn this game up.
I what did you play it on?
I played it on my computer monitor. So in the
So I played
game,
it on my Switch.
okay, they
I
don't have
don't
that option on the Switch, I
I
guess.
did up my screen brightness on the Switch, but it didn't help. I actually
Mm.
put the Switch's screen brightness all the way up. Now maybe if I would have plugged it into a TV, it would have been a bit better. But the Switch doesn't have like a bad backlight. Like I don't think it should have been that much of a problem. But in any case, that is my only like genuine like this isn't like a matter of personal preference. That is my only genuine criticism of this remaster. I thought overall it was actually a pretty solid remaster. I liked some of the quality of life stuff they added to it. I'm not nearly as familiar with remasters as you are, and like for those who don't know, those who don't follow Cade over on social media, which you totally should, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, he does amazing technical breakdowns of taking some of your favorite retro games and then applying a bunch of cool updates on them. Not updates is like almost underselling it. Like, how would you describe it, Cade?
Um, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. I cover a lot of. I cover emulation, mods, hacks, and indie games.
Yes. And you will take one of your favorite retro games, look at it on base emulation, and then do all these cool things to upscale it, upres it, like get indies like texture packs, like personalized, not personalized, sorry, but like fan made texture
Community made,
packs.
yeah,
Yeah,
fan
community.
made.
Thank you, community texture packs, and just like all these different things. And not to go too far off on a tangent, I'm still amazed at the amount of bullshit you have to deal with just from people complaining about. Like I feel I feel so bad that almost every one of your posts you have to have a like a 20-page disclaimer just in the hopes that it will actually like someone will read it and not comment
It
about
cuts
it.
down a lot. I would say when I started doing that a year and a half ago, the amount of bullshit I had to deal with cut by like 80%. It's actually quite effective.
Oh,
That's why
good,
I keep
good.
doing it. But I go back to the Soul Reaver thing. Maybe
Yes.
for me it's a little bit easier. But I did adjust the not my screen brightness, but the in-game brightness in the options menu. I don't that may be a PC only option. That's a pretty standard option to have on a PC game. It'll show you like a little
Yeah.
icon and it says adjust till the icon is barely visible on the left or something, right? And I turned it higher than what the game recommended. And then I also used reshade because I was injecting other stuff. And I did some level adjustment and contrast adjustment. And then to be fair, I injected ray trace lighting with like a third party tool. And
Hmm.
so like all your torches and all your lights like actually send rays that bounce off the walls and they light up the environment around them. And
Okay.
so I didn't have that issue, but I preemptively solved that just because I was tinkering with the game in the first place. So usually when I play a new game, I might tinker for a couple hours and get the settings to my liking and then play the game. And the darkness is an issue. I have seen those complaints online. If you're playing on PC, then you can adjust the in-game brightness setting. And if you still want to change it a little bit more, you could inject reshade and solve that problem. But if you're on the Switch or PS5, I'm reading some
Yeah.
comments, you're just
So
kind of SOL.
I just double checked. I literally, while a little behind the scenes, we had a quick break there. I actually grabbed my Switch. It was right. It was handy right next to me, and checked to see if there was brightness options in the game. Nope. I mean, I
Mm.
turned the screen brightness up manually on my Switch, but that doesn't help enough. You can also turn the day and night cycle off, which I also did, and even that wasn't enough. So, like, yeah, it just
Mm.
that's really my only complaint is that freaking thing. Like, I really can't stand that problem, and that it'd be one thing if it's just like, oh, it's not as bright as I would like it, but I can still play. No, I literally couldn't see things to solve puzzles. I could not I could literally could not see the wall I needed, the hole in the wall I needed to jump into to fight the boss. Now, like, if I was looking for it, I probably could, but since it was so dark, it just looked like another texture on the wall. Nothing stood out about it, and like, there's no reason that you would just randomly look up like that. You know what I mean? It anyway, I can get off my I can end this diatribe now. I'm good. I've ranted about my biggest criticism with the remaster, because other than that, I had a good time with it. I actually had a decent time with it, but I just man, there was some rough spots with it.
I
Um
uh, I agree. I mean, when you asked me to play, I was like, okay, I've been wanting to mess with this game and see what I could do with it anyway. And I have such fond memories of this game. And
mhm.
again, this like idea of a schizophrenic remaster or identity crisis is I picked the game up. It looked so good. The opening scene, when the elder god is talking to you and the tentacles and the textures and the models. I'm like, ah. And then I started playing it and realized like they didn't do anything with the controls or the
No.
physics. Like this plays exactly how it played in 1990, whatever.
Well,
But it has the coat of paint that is modern, and so it's that juxtaposition just feels weird. And as much as I
it
love this
does.
game, I'll have to admit I was shocked. It's like when you play it the original and you have low resolution and shitty graphics, it almost feels okay because it's supposed to
Well,
play
it's
clunky.
remember, like, old games look best on CRTs. Like,
Absolutely.
I listen, I love what you do with the emulation stuff, but you're like seeing what the original games look like emulated on like on like a flat screen HD or
Oh, they
LCD,
look god
whatever.
awful.
Yeah, some of them look okay, but like they do need work to look nicer on modern hardware. Um, and which is why I love what you do. But I think this is a good transition to talk about the gameplay. We've already kind of danced around some of my issues, and some of the stuff with the remaster. But you talking about specifically the jumping reminded me of something. Where when I literally just booted up the game again to check for the brightness setting, I jumped into my save file and I was running around, and I noticed something kind of weird. I don't know if this is a remaster thing or if the original game was like this, because once again, I only played the remaster. If I hit the jump button when Raziel is standing still, there is a delay in the
Yep.
jump. When I'm moving, there is no delay, or at least it doesn't feel like there's a delay. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah. That's in the original too.
Okay.
Um, the game is, and a lot of PS1 games have what I consider they're sludgy. It's like everything's just sort of sludged or slower behind.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the type of things that those subtle things that I was expecting based on the visuals of the remaster and the marketing of the remaster.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to play as tight as the visuals looked but it's still the 1990 whatever game under the hood. And they didn't, it doesn't, I mean, they did add the camera and I'm sure they tweaked some things, but then you could make the argument, well, do they want it to feel like the original for the fans who want it to feel that way? But I don't know. There's
I almost
nobody lauds Soul Reaver as a tight, polished platformer, even its
yeah.
biggest fans. People laud Soul Reaver for other purposes.
Yes. And I think those are the things that that I admire about it, the other stuff. And actually, just to real quick, what I do actually enjoy about the gameplay, I mean, I've been pretty critical of stuff, and I hopefully any Legacy of Kain fans haven't turned off the podcast about 40 minutes. I mean, they probably would have turned it off for 40 minutes in, but I do have some positive things to say about it. I might even put a little disclaimer, just if in case anyone doesn't want one of their favorite games shut on, because this game does have like a very devout fan base, and
Yes.
rightfully so. So some of the stuff that I did like about the gameplay, I liked the overall structure of how they pace out the power-ups. I thought the actual, that you start off with only being able to use melee weapons or your claws and other stuff, and you have to use your environment to take out enemies, and then you beat the first boss and suddenly you have the like this energy sword, and then you can start using that, and then you get a power up later on that you can blast, you can charge up your energy sword to like spear enemies, and then you can shoot enemies from a distance, and you can fly, and like they have all these cool abilities. And one that I did that I would have gotten if I would have been in the next area would have been that I don't go to the soul realm or the spiritual realm by falling into water. It doesn't disintegrate my body, and I would have loved to have that. But like I like that progression. I like the idea of like you getting more powerful so that way you can then go through other areas of the world that you were at before to get. It's very Metroidvania-esque, which I know we went into when we did our Link to the Past episode. But it does, this kind of feels like that, where you have to backtrack to go to other areas to get access to the next area you need to go, and they give you the warp stations to help out with that, so you're not completely walking through the entire area to do so. So I thought I liked that. I liked the puzzle solving between switching back and forth between the spirit realm and the corporeal realm, whatever the actual proper terms are. I apologize, I don't really remember what they're called. Um, and there was a couple times where I would forget about doing that. There's like one, I forget the level or the area, but what you had to do was you had to switch into the spirit realm, and then all the pipes, because it was almost like a sewage system, right? And all the pipes warped so much that it created a ramp for you to go up. So that way, when you got up to the top, you could switch back to the corporeal realm, the real realm, and then you would be able to progress. And that's on me for forgetting to do that. They tell you straight up in the beginning that like you should check the spirit realm because the worlds shift, so you have to remember that. So I was frustrated in that moment that I couldn't figure that out, and then when I looked it up I was mad at myself. I'm like, god damn it, they told me to try this in different spots, and that's on me. So I like the realm shifting to solve puzzles. I like the idea of the combat that they have. I don't really like the execution of it. Like you were saying, the combat's a little clunky. Um, and I really like the fast travel system. Those are all. There's just a lot of cool ideas that I don't think I saw very often in 3D action games in 1999. Right, like specifically the switching back and forth on the fly from different realms. Like I know like Zelda had, like Link to the Past has Dark Realm and Light World and all that other shit, but like this was like going back and forth between the two on a whim, and not just at like 5 or 6 separate like specific points throughout
And in real
Hyrule.
time, meaning you watch the
Yeah,
world shift, not just like a fade to black and then load the next world.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you did have to find the right like area to shift back to the corporeal realm, but that's just part of the puzzle solving at that point. You can always go into the ghost world, whether it's just by jumping in water or it's by just manually. You can manually select it whenever you want. So yeah, I liked all that stuff. I thought they had a lot of really cool ideas, and I just wish I liked the execution of it more. That's really what it boiled down to for me. I just wish I liked the execution of it more. And I've said this before in the show, and I'm going to stick to it. I like games that take swings, whether they work or not, or whether they don't work. I'd rather have a game be interesting and flawed than, even if I end up hating it, I'd rather have a game be interesting and flawed than boring. And this is, to me, is an interesting and flawed game. I ended up not really liking it, but if I played this back in 1999, I think I probably would have loved it.
I agree, but in reverse. So I loved it in
Mm,
1999, and I played it a couple times. Like probably in the most recent time I played it might have been 2012. So it's been a while um, since I played this version. I've tinkered with it, doing videos and the settings and stuff. When I got the remaster and sat down to play it, it was just, oh, this game
mm,
is old in the bad way. With
mm-hmm,
the control, like again, whether it's the controls, the physics, the gameplay. Like when you hit enemies, it doesn't feel like you're actually hitting them. Everything feels airy, like you're passing through it. There's just like a lot of little things that developers have figured out over the years to make combat feel more satisfying.
mm-hmm,
Frame stops, frame skips, collision detection, rumble. Like little things like when you hit an enemy, it will slow down for like a split second, and it's your subconsciously that registers to you like that was a hit, it connected, or a flash, or just like it has none of that. And I remember getting into the first battle before you get the Soul Reaver, like you said, and you have to throw these enemies into the water or a spike on the wall,
mm-hmm.
and it just was so not
Slow.
enjoyable.
Well,
It was
I think specifically the when you pick an enemy up, one you have to like incapacitate them, and that's only temporary because they'll essentially
yes,
get dazed, and then you can pick them up. And if you don't throw them or do what you need to do before with if you take too long, excuse me, to throw them or whatever you need to do, then they will you know wake up again. Then you have to do it all over again. You can continue to throw them and they'll stay dazed as long as you pick them up and continue to throw them. But obviously, you don't have as much precision then in what you're doing, and you have to run over, pick them up again, and hope that it's actually like somewhat closer to your objective, whether it's to throw them into a spike in the wall, or to throw them into the water, or push them off an edge, or push them into a fire, or something like that. Like
yeah,
whatever you need to do.
yeah. That's the concept you're saying. It's really cool, especially at the time, integrating environment into the battle system,
Yeah.
which for the time was much, you know, more innovative than it would be now.
Hmm.
But it just everything about this game is it was 1999, and I agree with you. They took some big risks. They tried some new things. They were really clunky in much of the execution. But I have the exact same sentiment when it comes to games. All of my favorite games are very flawed, but I love them because they took risks. Um, they're
Hmm.
not perfect games. And yeah, I don't want to go off on a tangent talking about these other games, but that concept is exactly where I feel I appreciate games taking risks, and even if the final product is rough around the edges, but you did something new and interesting, or you did something existing but with a new and interesting twist that hasn't been done before, or you put things together in a way that haven't been done before. Even if the execution isn't perfect, I appreciate that. It's probably why when Soul Reaver came out originally, that it was a big hit, because at the time it was very new and interesting and very fresh, and we hadn't played any modern games. So all the things that we're talking about now, it wasn't great at the time. Again, it was never lauded as this awesome precision Mario 64 type platformer. What people loved about it were the other things that we're going to talk about. But because we hadn't developed third person controls and action controls, we didn't know how bad it was.
I mean, I would say I see to me. I wouldn't say it's so. Yes, in a modern context, it's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah, but in 1999, I think you can't say it was bad in 1999 when it's compared to other stuff, right? Like if it was still just as clunky, if it was more clunky than other games like it that came out in 1999, then yeah, I then you might have something to stand on. But there a lot of games were like clunky back then. Like
A
it
ton.
just they were still trying to figure shit out. So I don't think this game was is bad for or it's I don't think the game's combat or platforming is okay, no. I don't think the game's combat is bad for its time. I think its platforming isn't great for its time, considering there was other games even on the PlayStation that did platforming much better than this. The combat I think was like just fine, but I think there's the things that make this game stand out are its world building and story
Yep.
and presentation.
Yep.
World building, story, presentation, combined with unique and interesting gameplay. Not always executed well, but like we said, it was unique and interesting, especially for 1999 when you really hadn't seen some. Like, there's been games that had elements of this, but this is a game that put a lot of different things together. I'm not going to say for the first time, but it's an early example of it for damn sure.
Yep, I agree. Maybe not first time for anything, but first time for all the sum of its parts.
Yes, that's a good way to
First time.
describe it.
Yeah.
So one other thing I want to talk about with the gameplay before we move on to the stuff that people really remember about this game, or much more, I would say, remember much more fondly. The bosses. I actually think the bosses, with the exception of the final boss, are pretty fun. Um, I had my issue with it, but once again, that's not the game's fault. That was the ports. The other bosses that I fought, specifically the one that always sticks out to me is like the one that's like, it's like mounted into the wall. It's got a bunch of different like tentacles and shit, and you have to take eggs, light them on fire, and throw it back at him. Like, that's fun as shit. It was a fun fight. You know, controls notwithstanding, but there's a lot of creative stuff. I do think some of them are a little obtuse, like watching the water ball, like the drowned Abbey, where I kind of fell off of the game at. I did watch the boss fight of it, and what you're supposed to do is, oh god, I would have lost my shit if I had to figure this out naturally, because this boss, it's all water, and you have these tiny little circular platforms that you have to jump from one to the other, which we already talked about. The platforming fucking sucks. And so if you jump off of it and then you fall into the water, then you have to climb back up, and I'm sure that thing can swim, so that's going to be a pain in the fucking ass too. um yeah, it so what you're supposed to do in that fight was, from what I saw, is that there's stained glass windows around it, and you're supposed to break the windows to essentially allow enough light in that it will eventually just fry him, right? And that's how you're supposed to beat him. So watching the long play of it, the guy didn't fall into the water once. He just broke as many windows as he could with his like power blast, hopped like 2 or 3 blocks over so he could get the windows behind him, and then that was that, right? Like, there really wasn't. I mean, I feel like it would have been hard for me to do it. It was a lot easier on the long play because long plays are meant to look perfect, or competent, I should say. So I think I would have raged really hard on that boss. I don't think I would have, like, even if I got up to him. What my biggest pet peeve, and what made me finally quit, was the fact that you would be trying to traverse a section, and it was very tight space jumps, and then you'd fall into the water below and have to take out a bunch of enemies because they were going to come after you, and you'd have to suck in their souls to get your health back, so that way you could then have, because you have to be at full health before you go back to the corporeal world, to the real world or whatever, and then you could finally climb back up, switch back over realms, and then hope that you don't fuck it up again. And it was just such a long amount of time just to get back to rinse, wash, and repeat and try again. Like, it was just so tedious. Like, it ended up not being fun because I couldn't. The game does not do a good job at all of teaching you like the physics that it's trying to, or actually, let me put it this way: the game does not do a good job designing around the limitations of the physics that they give you, right? What is it? The episode's nowhere near to be out yet, but I did an episode it'll be on, it's already recorded, it'll be up in October for backlog month on Castlevania, and one of the points that my guest makes is that uh Simon Belmont in the original Castlevania, right, on the NES, also is a really clunky jump. Once you jump, you're locked into that arc, right? Like, you can't adjust. Like, as soon as you jump, you are committing to that jump. Every single jump, it has to be intentional, and you have to commit to it. And the levels are designed around that. There's some bullshit, don't get me wrong, but by and large, the levels are designed around Simon's very stiff jump. This game does not design its platforming around its controls at all. It's almost like they said, what if you could control it? What if you could play this game as Mario, but we gave you the controls of like Sonic 1? You know, to be fair, just I'm not trying to throw shade at Sonic One. Sonic One actually is not. I actually enjoy it, but Sonic is a little bit more floaty. Like Mario is a lot more precise. Sonic is like his. I actually did give credit to Sonic, not to so I'm not completely alienating a fan base. Those levels are designed around Sonic's controls as well. This is a game that's designed for precise platforming, but they give you controls for a game that's not precise,
Yeah.
and that's where that disconnect comes for me.
I wanted to bring up. I agree with you on the controls. We've beaten that horse pretty
I'm
heavily.
sorry I brought it back up again. I'm so
No,
sorry.
it's fine. I think that if you're going to play the remaster and you're considering, and you love the game, just it still plays like a 1999 game, right? With that didn't have great controls to begin with. They were passable for the time, and they feel very bad in modern times. But one thing I did want to bring up, that particular boss, the Drowned Abbey boss and the stained glass windows, is
Mm-hmm.
hard, and it looks easy on a long play, but it did make me think of something this game does really well that a lot of action games don't do anymore.
Hmm.
And that is the boss battles are more of a puzzle than a battle.
Yeah, that's
Almost
true.
every boss battle, it's not like beef up my sword, get the highest attack, dodge the attacks, and do as much damage. No, that's not how most of these boss battles play out. And modern action games it's pretty rare. Sometimes you'll have a small puzzle element, like when you stun him, that's when you can do a certain move, or you can do lots of DPS. But a lot of Soul Reaver bosses, you don't even beat them by attacking them the way you attack regular enemies.
That's so true.
They're essentially a puzzle.
I never thought of it that way. Yeah, the boss fights are puzzles. I think if I would have gone into it like that, I think I would have ended up enjoying some of the boss fights a little bit more that I did. I liked what I did play, but like specifically the last one, which I will look up that boss's name, uh, Duma, yeah, Duma. I don't know how you pronounce his name. He's one of Raziel's brothers. Well, they're all his brothers, but he's like as big as a fucking tank. Like he's huge, and when you first come across him, just to like kind of comment slightly on the game's world building and everything, he is impaled by three giant stakes, and Raziel comes up and like rips him out one at a time, and he wakes up slowly, and then you have to essentially just run away from him and then light him on fire. Which watching this, I was like, how the hell would I have figured that out? Like, I don't know if I would have figured that out, but I was approaching a boss fight from a combat perspective, and I think you make a really good point, Cade, where like these are puzzles. All of these are puzzles with some combat elements, but by and large, they are puzzle based boss fights, and that's a really good point.
That could be one of those risk taking things that wasn't executed perfectly, but it is something I wouldn't mind if that design philosophy was incorporated into more modern games. A lot of boss fights in modern games become bullet sponges, so to
Yeah,
speak, right? And they just, they have a move set, you have to memorize it. They just give them a ton of HP and a ton of defense. And the challenge is you can't mess up for, 10 minutes straight
yeah,
because, the boss can kill you in 2 hits and has lots of life. But
hmm
that's it. You're just doing, it's a war of attrition. Whereas this game, it's, you can kill these bosses really fast once you have the puzzle figured out and make it look really, really easy. And I think that's a cool design philosophy. I wish more games had that. In fact, I was playing the new Astrobot with my kid recently,
Oh,
and
it's so good.
it's very good. And a lot of the bosses are like that too, right? It's more figuring out the puzzle of the boss. Now, the boss I'm thinking of is more of, you have a bunch of set of patterns of things to dodge, but there's puzzle elements of when they do this attack the first couple times, you may not know exactly what you're supposed to do to dodge that attack. You die a couple times. There's hints in the game. You figure it out. Oh, I have to use the rocket to dodge this attack. I have to use the laser to do that. Then I've got to break the floor. Then I got to do this. Okay, then I can actually attack the enemy and do some damage. And it's more of a balance of puzzle and battling or fighting.
That's so true.
And yeah, Legacy of Kain that's something I think is cool. Was it executed great? originally, I think originally, like with the controls and the battle system, because it was so fresh and new then, and the entire game was fresh and new, and we had never had a Zelda-esque adult vampire dark gritty game like that with the voice acting and the writing. So it seemed probably better than it really was. Playing those bosses now on the remaster, it's gonna feel it's going to feel a little clunky because a lot of times the controls to do the puzzle element of the boss don't feel great. So throwing the egg, like throwing, as you mentioned, is kind of annoying, and it's aiming the throw is hard. And sometimes you think you're picking the thing up, but you don't pick it up, and you just push it. Oh, you know what else is like frustrating? Latching onto blocks to move them
Oh, the block puzzles are very tedious.
and slow. Yes,
Yeah, that to me is just I that didn't bother me so much because it's very 1999. It is what it is, but it does really break up the flow of the game when you hit a block puzzle and then you're just there for 10 minutes, not because you haven't figured out the puzzle, but because you have to move the goddamn blocks after you've
and
already
then, like,
solved the puzzle.
sometimes because the controls are weird, he moves it the wrong direction, and each one of those move
Hmm.
animations is like, "Oh my god, this is already so slow," and you just went the wrong direction, and I was pretty sure I was pushing the joystick in the right direction, but for whatever reason, you went the wrong direction. And just little things like that do add up over time, and they do take away. I know we keep coming back to bitching about the controls, but the reason it
It's the
sucks is
focal.
because
It's
I think
everything like
everything gets
funnels into
saved
it.
by it. Yes, yes,
It
yeah, like, when you're doing the puzzles for the bosses, sometimes it's hard to appreciate the boss arena and the architecture and the world building and the ambience, things that this game very much excels at. Because when you're playing in 2025, even as someone who has very fond memories of this game, it was really distracting, the frustration
yeah.
of the controller. It just kept distracting me.
Yeah. I yeah. I like you said, we keep talking about it, but everything funnels through. Like all of the gameplay funnels through these controls. Like this is the choke point, right? So as much as we try to get off of we're going to keep coming back to the controls because when we talk about a boss and what we like about it, we ultimately have to also bring up, well, like this is really cool, but this is going to be stupid hard because the game controls like a butt. Everything just kind of funnels back down to it.
Yep.
um, I do want to move on though to some of the other stuff. You know, I really want to talk about the world building in this specifically and the visuals and like there's so many cool other aspects to this. But the last couple fun facts I want to throw in there that tie in with our gameplay discussion. Before the Soul Reaver team was working on the game, they actually were working on a game called Shifter, and Shifter was about a Shifter was going to be a game where a player could possess different characters and shift through different realms. The shifting realms obviously stayed, and the possession mechanic went away. One of the reasons they dropped the possession mechanic and it wasn't going to work was back in the PS1 days, you would generally have a high poly model, high poly relatively speaking, but a high polygon model with a lot of details for your main character because that's what you're going to be looking at the vast majority of the time when you're playing a game, right? Uh, and then the rest of the character models, whether it's for enemies or NPCs or whatnot, were going to be lower poly because you might not look at them as often. If you are possessing different characters, that means every character that you could potentially take control of would have to be high poly to fit in with that whole thing. Otherwise, you're going to have one character model that looks fucking awesome, and then you'll get control and it'll be like a cube. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like they couldn't find a way to kind of balance those two things out. So they scrapped the possession mechanic and they obviously went on and they shifted, pun kind of intended, to this Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver game. The gameplay was aiming to be similar to Tomb Raider, which I can kind of see with how like the high jumps and how they do a little bit of the platforming, because Tomb Raider also had somewhat clunky controls. Well, not somewhat, fairly clunky controls, but from what I've played, at least of the original Tomb Raider, it feels a lot more balanced around that design, but I could also be misremembering. Um, they also used to develop this game. They used the Gex 3 engine. So, but I mean, I know Gex is a Crystal Dynamics game, so it makes sense because Crystal Dynamics made this game. But still, it just kind of makes me laugh that like the Gex 3 engine is what's under the hood for this game. And the last thing I want to bring up is Cade, you actually already touched on it, that the streaming tech, streaming meaning, back in the days, listeners, for those who might be a little bit younger than us, games could not load an entire game at once. And technically they still can't, but they have ways of masking that now. But that's what's called streaming, where you unload a section of the game and load something else. In the PS1 days, they didn't really have a good way to do that just yet. They were still figuring out those types of things. So that's why in old PS1 games, when you're playing Crash Bandicoot, you load a level and then once you beat it, you load the menu screen, stuff like that. What streaming allows you to do is that you hide all those loading screens in some way, shape, or form. So you would notice it more in modern games where like you'd finish up a firefight or like a puzzle or something like that, and then you'd walk through a decent sized hallway. That hallway was now your loading screen. It was deloading everything that you had just come from, everything that you just came from, and loading the next section of the game that you're going to. So that's in a nutshell, that's what streaming is. And it was much more difficult to do that on a PS1. And they developed some really advanced, like high, like top of the line streaming tech for this game, which Cade, you talked about. That was one of the big selling points for this. It was a seamless world where there was no loading screens, and that's very impressive for a PS1 game, right? Like that's like even Zelda on Ocarina of Time didn't have that. You would have large areas, but then they would load if you went to Kakariko Village or Hyrule Castle, it would deload Hyrule Field and load the town, and vice versa.
Yeah, in Ocarina of Time, they had the benefit of it being on a cartridge, so the read-write speed was way faster. So
So it
the
didn't feel like it.
it didn't feel it was loading things. The reason why it was so groundbreaking on the PS1 is if you go back and play PS1 games on original hardware, it's my favorite console. I have one. I have a bunch of games, but I almost always play on emulator because it's so slow. It
Mm-hmm.
is the loading sometimes
Well, you're
is
waiting
so.
on the disk drive to
You're
read
waiting on the
stuff.
disk drive, and the read write speed of that disk drive was as a relic of its time. And, like play for a notorious example, Chrono Trigger in the Final Fantasy Chronicles or whatever on the PS1 is you have to wait to load every time you open the menu. And
You
I
have to
beat
wait to
that.
load every time you go into a battle.
Yes, and I beat that game on the PS1 because I didn't have a Super Nintendo at the time. And so I'm like, sweet, it's on PS1 now. And I don't remember it being that bad because at the time I was used to the PlayStation 1 and I had acclimated to loading times and I had accepted them as part of my life. But going back now, it's impossible. So loading times were a thing back then and people got sick of it. And so that definitely was a major part of the hype is this game has no loading times and you're seeing screenshots of it and I didn't understand what streaming tech was and rendering only what the character can see. These is all
Mm-hmm.
things that are pretty well known in the lexicon now amongst gamers, but when I was a kid we didn't understand that. So to me it was just sorcery. Like how the fuck did they do this?
Yeah.
How are they even doing this? So it seemed like real magic at the time. Now, this technique is actually used even in more modern games, but they're so much better at it now.
Uh huh.
I've been playing with the camera hack for the Uncharted 4. So Uncharted 4 was on the PS4, and it looked really good for a PS4 game. Insane. But what I've noticed with detaching the camera and working on some videos is the streaming distance in Uncharted 4 is so much shorter than you would imagine.
Really?
They have certain scenes where it's like, hey, you come out on this cliff and you can see really far, this big open whatever. But when you're inside or you're going in, like in caves and stuff, if you detach the camera, you will go ahead what looks like to be 20 feet in the game space and like turn right in a quarter. And if you take the camera and turn right, nothing is loaded.
Oh wow.
Nothing. And the way they made that game look so good is between clever streaming techniques and level design so that it never felt like only just 50 feet around you was rendering, because and then they would have sections of the game where, hey, when you come out here, sure, you see a big open scenery, whatever, but everything behind you is in hidden. And then like if you notice the areas where you have big open scenes and you can see stuff, aside from a couple of the open, like the drivable areas, everything collapses around you when you detach the camera. And so this same technique is still being used all the time. And it's not
Mhm.
that Soul Reaver was the first to do it
No, no.
by any stretch, but it was the first to do it at the scale and in the way they did it at that time. So I think that's
Especially
pretty
on a
cool.
PS1, man. Like
Yes.
that's what's just so impressive about it. It was a very technically impressive game for its time. And it honestly, visually, it also was a very visually impressive game for a PS1.
Yep.
The specifically the design of Raziel is really fucking cool. I think we can use this in a transition to talk about like the visuals and like to me, in a weird sense, visuals blend in with storytelling and all this other stuff. Because when you'll talk about Raziel's design, uh, why does he look that way? Then we go into story. You know what I mean? Like I feel like these will kind of we might jump back and forth a little interchangeably, but Raziel, for those who have not played this, he doesn't have a bottom jaw. Like essentially it's like it's almost like he just has like an open maw underneath his like upper like his top jaw, right? And so throughout the game he has a scarf over it, so that way you're just not looking at like this open wound pretty much. I don't think it's actually a wound, but it kind of looks like that's what the first thing that came to my mind was. And when he eats souls, he actually, to heal himself, he actually pulls the scarf down and you see like the souls get sucked up. It's so fucking badass. His design is awesome.
Agreed. And I think that in a good game, design and lore and world building should
Yeah,
go together. They should be
hand in hand.
thoughtful. I think even like I always talk about Kojima as a joke, right? Because some people worship Kojima. I'm a fan of Kojima, but I also don't worship him. That's part of the joke.
Hmm.
Um, I think sometimes Kojima just thinks, it'd be really fucking cool. A guy that drops bombs on rollerblades. Let's put him in, and then
Yeah.
let's figure out how to make like it doesn't fit, but it just whereas the opposite end of the spectrum would be say Elden Ring. When you get to I forget the name of the town, but there's like all these crazy people that wear flower crowns and they've all gone mad. It's this like town that's been possessed and everyone's gone crazy. And you learn what happened in that town and you realize the character designs all work with the lore. They're
Hmm.
dressed in those dresses for a reason. They have the flowers on their head for a reason. They are put in the positions they are for a reason. And every character and every NPC and every enemy, their design reflects and connects to the lore of the game and the area that you find them. It's all thought through and cohesive. And a lot of that is subliminal, you don't necessarily know, or some of it is explicitly stated through item descriptions and so on and so forth if you want to dig. But when that is done, there's a certain feeling that makes everything feel more believable.
Hmm.
And Soul Reaver has that. Just the name Raziel, which I don't know if you found this little tidbit, but I thought it was really cool because I'm interested in like mystic traditions.
Yeah.
So you have like Gnosticism, Rosicrucianism, Masonry, all that forth. The name Raziel comes from Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah. So Gnosticism is sort of like Christian mystical tradition.
Hmm.
Kabbalah is Jewish, and in the Kabbalah, Raziel is an archangel known as the keeper of secrets, and he was part of the fall of Adam and Eve. But
Oh,
he's
okay.
not really talked about in the Bible, but he's part of the Kabbalah. And so I just thought like they were trying to have this like Gothic religious feel, and they looked at Gnosticism. Amy Henning has specifically talked about looking into Gnosticism, vampire mythology, Shakespearean tragedy, and Gnostic philosophy. And those things come together also with the architecture of the game. So every area of the game is based on a different ancient architecture.
Mm.
Some of it is like Christian stuff. Some of it is Arabic, Middle Eastern. Some of it is Aztec influenced. And that all plays into making each realm and each of, I don't know if they're Kain's brothers or the other generals. I forget the relationship, but you're going through each area and killing like the main vampire that's been
Sent to like rule over that
yeah,
area.
and it's been mutated because of the corruption of the realm. There, each area is based has sort of a reference, not just in terms of the main guy and the character that you're fighting,
Mhm.
but they're each one is distinctively referencing a different architecture style based on a different culture, and then they're building the enemies and the boss to reflect things about that culture, but also combine it with the lore of the world and the game and the narrative. And so all that attention to detail is, and then the overall story of the series, where Soul Reaver is not the beginning, it's sort of in the middle, and everything kind of comes full circle. I don't know how much you want to spoil stuff.
I would try not to spoil too much because if I mean, I don't know. Part of me is like, I probably am not going to play another one of the games in this series, but at the same time, like, I don't know. Never say never. I never know.
I would say at least watch a really good YouTube video that goes through like the whole game, the whole series, because the story and the way it connects and all the Easter eggs and the attention to detail, it's not perfect. It involves time travel. And anytime you involve time travel, you get weird paradoxes that don't totally make sense.
Hmm.
But it's not as bad as other time travel narratives. So, and Soul Reaver is a really important, pivotal part of the overarching lore of the entire series. Not only the name Soul Reaver, Raziel being the first person to have the Soul Reaver, but what the nature of the Soul Reaver ends up being. All this stuff is really, really important, and that it goes to show that they put a lot of attention into crafting the environment and the story and connecting those things. When a lot of other games, going back to what I said earlier, sometimes I might just
Yeah.
say, you know, it'd be cool, fucking man eating crocodiles with machine guns. Let's
Right.
do it. Right. And it just, whatever. That's not this game.
No, I agree with you, and it's something that even though as I've said, I didn't enjoy my time with it. I really enjoyed the world building and the visual, like the overall like visual language that the game relays like its world to you in. I thought it was all just really fun to look at and interesting. Like, and like the PS1 graphics genuinely don't look that bad. Like, I think the art direction is like amazing. I'm not just talking about even like having like you can have a cohesive world design, like this type of architecture here and this type there and this type there. But if your art direction is bad, then none of those things gel with each other. They gel here. They all work together really well to create this very like otherworldly place that looks vaguely human but vaguely apocalyptic because of that. Like it makes you uneasy, and I like that. It made me uncomfortable. Not like literally, it's not like I was anxious, but like maybe not uncomfortable, maybe not discomfort's the right way to describe it, but it makes it otherworldly is the best way I can put it. I know I used that word before, but I can't think of a better descriptor. It's otherworldly, where it feels so vaguely human, but not uncanny valley. It doesn't do that uncanny valley thing where it feels almost human but not. It just, the world is so interesting to look at and explore through, and the way that they present it, like I think in the documentary they even talk about how like the story of this game uh isn't anything groundbreaking per se, but that's not, but I mean talking about in terms of plot for plot, right? Like plot point to plot point, it's not anything that's like groundbreaking, but its presentation and the characters and the vocal performances, which this also has full voice acting, which is insane for 1999. I know Metal Gear Solid did it, but like remember, this is still the era where voice acting A was not the norm, and B, if you did have voice acting in it, it wasn't going to be the quality that this was, um, by any stretch of the imagination. So like, there's just so much to love about it. That like, sorry, I lost the thread for a second there, but the story of this, while it is vaguely simple, it's just that Raziel is like your character Raziel is like Kane's one of Kane's like confidants or like second in command. I'm not exactly quite sure of
I think he's
their
referred to as one of the generals.
one of the generals. Okay, and Raziel grows wings. Kain is jealous. Tears the. It's a fucking metal scene. You already talked about it for a little bit, Cade, where like he tears the bones from Raziel's wings and throws him into the lake of the dead. And Raziel gets resurrected, and he become by the Elder God and becomes the Soul Reaver to kill Kain. And so to get enough powers to kill Kain, he has to. This is like years later after he was thrown into the lake of the dead, and he has to go back and absorb the souls of his brothers who are still under the influence of Kain in order to then fight Kain at the very end of the game, which was a little bit of an underwhelming fight, if I'm going to be honest. From what I saw, maybe it was a lot more challenging in the original, but it seemed a little underwhelming. But the that's pretty much like the basic plot of the game. But what makes it interesting is when they feed you little bits of lore about the world itself. Like the story may not be all that interesting, and I shouldn't say that. The story may not be all that complicated. It's interesting, but it may not all be that complicated, but it doesn't need to be because they put so much world building into the story as they're going through talking about the history, and like you hear about different clans and all this other stuff. It's just really well executed how they have this.
Yeah, they I think there's hundreds of years that pass in between when you fell into the lake of the dead and when the elder god resurrects you.
Yeah.
And so you learn about what happened to all your brother's clans and the history and the infighting and how they ended up the way that you observe them by the time you face off to each boss. And as I said, the boss's design and even now that I'm thinking about the puzzle elements reflect the lore about the area and what had happened in that area while you were basically waiting to be resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this very thoughtful, the architecture, the lighting, the NPCs, the enemy designs, the boss design, it is all influenced and connected to the lore of that area. In terms of the story, yes, I don't know how much Amy Henning pre-planned and how much of it was retconned and done in real time with the sequels. But the story becomes the main narrative, and the relationship between Raziel and Kain becomes much more complicated, and not necessarily in a bad way, but less straightforward than a vengeance story.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I don't know how much of that was planned, like Amy Henning was planning what was going to happen in the sequels, because there are things in Soul Reaver that line up and foreshadow and give hints that happen in Defiance and Soul Reaver 2. Or when they were writing Soul Reaver 2 and Defiance, did they go back and look for things? Like, okay, we need to find a way to connect it to Soul Reaver 1 and make it feel natural. Either way, whether it was done pre-planned or done in hindsight, it ends up working. So when you look at Soul Reaver's story in the grand scheme of the entire series, it looks less cut and dry and more complicated as it's
Oh yeah.
placed in the series.
I meant specifically just the plot of this game,
No, I
not
agree.
necessarily.
I agree. If you're just looking at the game by itself, it's a vengeance story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get vengeance on the guy. And like a good revenge story is a good revenge story. But what I
John
think,
Wick, baby.
yeah, exactly. Killed my dog. That's all it is. Now I'm going to kill 500 Russians, and that's the movie. Um, I think that it's a revenge story with cool world building, and then if you were to go on and continue to play the rest of the series, that revenge story would evolve into something more. And again, I don't know if I should give the game credit for that, because that may have been done retroactively to figure out how to connect all of that, and it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
pre-planned. If it was pre-planned, because I don't think Amy Henning wrote all the other games. But maybe she did have plans and she passed those notes along, and that was shared. I don't know who developed the other games or who wrote the other games. Let's actually just look that up real quick. Did Amy Henning write all the Soul Reaver games? Oh no, she did. So this might have
Okay, there we
all
go.
been. Maybe it's to the game's credit then. She might have had this all master planned out from the beginning.
Amy Hennig, I guess I should have actually mentioned it at the top of the episode. Amy Hennig is the lead director of this game. She was the director and writer and producer of this game, and she famously went on to work on Jack and Daxter, and more famously was the person who pretty much came up with the Uncharted series. She was the lead writer on Uncharted 1, and I think 1 through 3, and then she left Naughty Dog. And I don't know what she's been up to since, but yeah, she was the director and lead writer for the Uncharted, for the first 3 Uncharted games. Excuse me. I'm curious who did the writing for. So the first Jack and Daxter was not her. Did she come in Jack 2 at all? No, Daniel Ari did all of that in did Jack 1 and 2. Did she help out with 3 at all? No, the same dude wrote all 3. I wonder what. Oh, she was one of the directors for Jack 3. That's what it was. Okay, so yeah, she's done some directing work for it. And yeah, she was co-director on Jack 3, I should say. So Amy Hennig is like an industry like legend. She's been around the industry for quite some time. Her most recent writing credit is there's a new game coming up, Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra. It's an upcoming action adventure game developed by Skydance New Media, and it's supposedly based off of a limited comic, a Marvel series from 2010. She also did the story concept for a game that I know got like mixed reviews. I'd have to see whatever it actually got. Yeah, it's a pretty mid game for all accounts of it. Forspoken, that Square
Dude,
Enix game that came out.
I actually like Forspoken. I think
It looked cool to me. It looked
I
really
like.
cool. Actually, it was developed by Luminous Productions, but she was a story. She has the story concept for that. She's credited to the story concept for that. So yeah. Anyway, so she's an industry legend, and this is like one of her first. I don't know. I'm not going to say it was her first. I'd have to check out her like Moby Games list to see what all she's worked on, but she's been in the industry for quite some damn time.
And she did direct, produce, and write Soul Reaver. She also directed and wrote Soul Reaver 2 and Defiance. So that makes a little bit more sense to me because
Yes.
I was leaning towards this whole thing had to have been master planned. And if it wasn't, they were really good at retconning it and making it feel natural. But she probably had a general map of this entire arch.
Oh my god! Sorry,
And,
this. I looked up her Moby Games credit. So yeah, this is like her first one that she like wrote on, which is crazy. Think about that, right? Like she did. That's just crazy to me. Actually, I hold on. Let me double check this. Let me check by role. Her first writing credit, yeah, it is Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. Like that, what a fucking banger to start off on, right? Like that's crazy. But the thing that actually blew my mind that I was like, holy shit, that I said holy shit for, her first game design credit, at least according to Moby Games, is the Super Nintendo game from 1994, Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City. Have you ever seen that game?
no, I have no idea what it is.
Oh my god. Okay, I'm going to send you a picture in Discord right now. The picture of the box art is literally Michael Jordan holding 2 basketballs. One is frozen and the other is on fire. And the whole game is you just like chucking basketballs at enemies. It's like an action platformer. It is
Wow.
it's insane. I actually have a copy of it. It's an exploratory platform. It's not straight like 2D left, side scrolling left to right. It's like you have to go down and up and all over the place. Kind of very much in the same vein as something like like Cool Spot or something like that, right? Like where it wasn't necessarily linear. You had to look around, but that
I'm watching some footage of it now. I have never heard of this game.
this game's fucking nuts, dude. And I can't believe she's credited with game design. I want to try to get her on the podcast just so I can, like, listen, I would love to talk to her about Uncharted. It's one of my favorite game series of all time. But I want to talk to her specifically about working at that game because holy shit, that's wild.
I've never, like, yeah, it's like I didn't know Michael Jordan was in a 2D action platformer.
I know, right? That's one of my favorite like weird games that games on the NES and like Super Nintendo. You're always going to get some weird ideas thrown in there, and that's one of my favorites. That's like that. What is it? I think I can't. I don't remember if it's a fan game, if it was an actual like licensed game. There's a game called Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam.
Yeah, that's a is that the RPG Maker one?
I
No,
think
Charles
so.
Barkley Shut Up and Jam is a real game. But there's another like RPG Maker like fan game that has Charles
That's
Barkley.
what
Like,
I'm thinking of. Yeah. So Barkley Shut Up and Jam was released for the Genesis. Okay, I'm thinking of the there's like an RPG Maker one. Yeah,
yeah, I gotta remember what it's called. I'm gonna find it because it's also batshit crazy and very infamous.
that's what I was
The
thinking
most
of the fan
controversial
game.
RPG maker ever made. There it
What's
is. I'm
fucking
trying to find
nuts?
the.
Uh, anyway, while you're looking that up real quick, I guess the last thing I want to say in general, because we already kind of talked about like how much we love the visual aesthetics and how it feeds into the world building and the story so expertly, like it's so well crafted. I just want to just give just a huge general shout out to this game's presentation. Like if y'all couldn't tell, we both Kate and I really like it, but like it's just the fact that the voice acting adds so much to this because it's just so strong. Like between the narration, between all the different like bosses, between Kane's performance and Raziel's performance, like it's all really well done. And it once again just adds to that sense of immersion in this world that they're trying to build for you. I know I keep using the phrase world building. I need to find another synonym because I feel like I'm repeating that too much, but it's just, man, if this game had better gameplay and better tighter control, like tighter physics in the controls, man, like there's just so much going for it. I think this is what kills me about this game is that there is so much promise. There is so much when I was playing it, I'm like, man, this is cool and this is cool and I like this and I like that. And it all bottlenecks with the physics and the controls because there's so many amazing things in this game and but it's just not fun to play. And that's what is so heartbreaking about this for me is that I want to like this game more because it's got a lot of things that I do like in games. It just it's just heartbreaking. I don't know. Were you able to find Shut Up and Jam?
Yeah, it's Shut Up and Jam Gaiden. That's why it was confusing.
Okay.
The RPG fan game just adds Gaiden to the end. Totally different game. And I was watching some footage. They're bringing in like different assets from different games on Genesis and Super Nintendo. And I've never played it. I just know it's considered a controversial fan game.
That's
I
what
don't
I've
even
heard too.
I don't even know why it's controversial. I just know they say it is.
I guess we'll have to figure it out. I'll
Yeah,
try it
one of
out
these days
sometime
I have
and
to
see
try
what
it
it
out.
is. Before there's one last thing we have not talked about. I don't have much to say because I feel like we should at least bring it up, but the soundtrack. I don't have much to say on it because not because it's bad or anything like that, but just nothing really stuck out to me when I was watching the long play for it after I had given up trying to play it. It also is hard for me to listen because a lot of times I was playing this when my kid was still awake, so like she would ask to come over and like watch me play and take the earbud out of my ear and put it in her ear so she could like watch me fighting all these like wraiths and vampires and shit. um so it was hard for me to really focus on that, but watching the long play of it, excuse me, I really thought it was good, like very like specifically in the sense that it wasn't necessarily anything that I could remember a melody of, but it was atmospheric. It did a great job of setting the tone, and it matched the tone of this gothic architecture that they keep putting you in, this gothic mythic architecture. It's really good. And it actually, in a bizarre sense, like it works really well with the enemy sound effects. Like when you hit an enemy and they go that it it doesn't happen on beat obviously or anything like that, but it kind of it matches in energy, is for
Mm.
lack of a better term. Like it just feels like it belongs in the same soundscape. So it's just really good sound design, in my opinion. I can't say much about the soundtrack because I don't remember much of it, but I thought the sound design was really good.
There's a couple things I want to bring up. I agree that the ambience, the vibe was added to by the sound design. There's a couple things, well, one thing in particular that the PS1 version did at the time I thought was really awesome, and games do it now um, to some degree of success. I'm going to connect this to one of my biggest pet peeves with JRPGs. But Soul Reaver did something when it first came out, the original version, that a lot of people weren't doing at the time, and that is it had a dynamic soundtrack. Definitely, again, one
Mm,
of these things that wasn't the first one to do it, but each area had its own individual theme, the song, and it had different versions depending on what you were doing. If you had
mm,
already beaten the area and you were backtracking, it would have a different version of that song. If you were in the middle of doing a puzzle, the song would switch to like the puzzle version of that song. And exploring, fighting, puzzle solving, and then spectral material realm versions, it would shift based on which realm you were in. So you have your base melody and your base song, and then in the spectral world, it would have more reverb and delay because you were in the spectral world. And when you were fighting, there would be more drums to it, and when you were exploring, it'd be more ambient with no beat. When you were puzzle solving, it would have like different melodies that would come and go and make it sound mysterious. And it was dynamic based on what you were playing. Now, a lot of games do this now, where if you get into like the action heats up, the music heats up. Doom, the new Doom 2016 and Doom
hmm
Eternal did this, and everyone, Mick Gordon crushed it. But one thing that I hate about JRPGs, and this is Soul Reaver did not make this mistake. It's not a JRPG, but say you're in like an ice cavern or a water world or a fire volcano in the JRPG, and you have awesome music that accompanies that area and sets the vibe, and you're vibing, you're running around, you're playing. It's got this awesome tune. JRPGs are known for having very catchy and listenable music. And then you get in the battle and it switches to the battle theme, and the battle theme may not be bad, but you're going to hear
hmm
it 65 million fucking times by the time you finish this game, and
Yeah.
no song is going to be awesome 65 million times. And on top of that, what really bothers me in JRPGs is you'll be vibing, like you're in the area, the music matches the
Yeah.
scene and the
hmm
pixels, and the wind is blowing, and you're like sucked in and you're immersed, and you get taken out of that. What I think JRPGs should do is exactly what Soul Reaver did: is you don't change the song, but you make the song,
You change the arrangement.
you change the arrangement, you add drums, you make it a little bit heavier when you're in battle and when you're not. And Soul Reaver did that, and that was something that, again, not the first game to do it, and lots of games have done it since, but it did it in a way where I think what you said is actually a testament to the quality. I don't think a soundtrack, for the most part, should stand out. It's there to support. You don't want it to get in the way. You want it to be. You want it to add to you being immersed into the game.
Yeah.
And occasionally, you want the soundtrack to have like a theme or a melody that you can remember, like a main theme or a certain
hmm
scene or something like that. But a lot of the time, you don't want the soundtrack to get in the way. You want it to be. If it's done right, you don't notice it. It's subliminal. It's subconscious, but
hmm
it adds to the ambiance and the vibe of the game. A bad soundtrack will stand out. It's like, the music was bothering me, or it was too loud, or it was, like you said, maybe it's not jiving with the sound effects. So I think that's a credit to the game. The only downside is I do think soundtracks should have at least a couple jingles, a main theme, or something that does get stuck in your head that
Yeah.
you associate with the game. I don't have anything that stands out, but I do remember as a kid being really impressed that the reverb. But PS1, for those who were into music making and audio files, I make beats. The PS1 reverb sound that's used in a lot of PS1 games, because it has something to do with the chip, the sound processor in the PS1, is this weird nostalgic kind of shitty but good reverb. And the
Mhm.
reverb times of footsteps and sound effects would change based on where you were at. So if you were in the
Oh,
spectral realm, and a lot of games did this even back during this time. It'd be like if you were in a tunnel, the steps would be more reverby, or if you're walking on sand versus stone, the
yeah.
steps would change. Like people were starting to get into these little details. But that combined with the dynamic soundtrack, again, this is like lots of things about Soul Reaver have an extreme attention to detail for the time. And again, a Soul Reaver to me has a little bit of an identity crisis because part of it, so much of it is so good. And even if you're giving it grace for the time that it came out, I know I think it's the fourth time I've said it, but you're not going to go back in time and find reviews of Soul Reaver talking about how awesome the controls are. That's not what they're going to talk
I
about.
think I even read one of the contemporary reviews at the time commented that it felt a little clunky.
Yes, even for the time. So it's like so much of this game was so polished and took chances and was so awesome. And then some of it wasn't. And again, I think we both agree. I would rather have a game that takes chances and does things different and has some rough edges than to play a highly polished cookie cutter regurgitated game.
Yes, and it's kind of funny because as I say that, even though I say that I enjoy that, I like that they take risks, and then I also compliment Amy Hennig's biggest franchise, which is arguably known to be one of the biggest cookie cutter franchises, which is
Mhm.
Uncharted. I love Uncharted. Don't get me wrong, but
Well, no, Uncharted 1, it was a new formula for a game. I
yes,
mean,
Uncharted
yes,
One was.
not the Indiana Jones kind of ripoff. Like obviously that'd been around in terms of set and setting, but the gameplay of like the climbing and the jumping and now there's still games. I mean, I've played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and they have Uncharted sections of
Yes,
climbing. I'm like,
I heard there was a big discourse online for a while because of all the yellow paint stuff on that, which
yes,
that's a
yes.
conversation for another day. But yeah,
So
yeah,
Uncharted became cookie cutter
that's true. That's
to
fair. That's a fair
itself.
point. Yeah, to
Yeah.
itself. Yeah, but I don't really have much more to add to this. I think we've covered the game in a good amount of detail with everything. I I think you really summed it up nicely, man. I think really what it boils down to is just that this game does some things good, it does some things bad, but ultimately, I think it's successful enough because it has the cult following. Like, obviously, it didn't appeal to me, but like with this game's world building and its story, I think if I would have played this when it came out, when it came out in '99, I would have been 10 years old when this game came out, right? So 10 years old, maybe played it, another year later, like 11 or 12. Oh my God, this would have like been right up my alley as like someone who was like a little bit emo into like that type of goth shit, even though I wasn't a goth, like I would have eaten this up. I think this game is ahead of its time in a lot of different ways, specifically in presentation and world building, especially for console games, but its controls are just so hard to get around for me. I just can't do it. And for any fans of the game out there listening to this and you've made it this far, one, thank you for not shutting it off. I don't know. For the vibe I was getting off the fan base online is that it's a little bit of like Soulsborne fan community, like just they're rabid about it. So
Mhm.
I'm just a little nervous that people are going to just like go crazy if I be not liking it. I don't know, but I got to be honest, it just didn't hit with me. So anyway, I'm rambling. I've been rambling way too much on this episode. Kate, I want to throw it over to you for your final thoughts on this.
Uh, I think that if you are going to play the game, I do recommend the remaster because you get the best of both worlds. It's easy. It's available on all modern consoles and PC. If you want the old school experience, you can just press a button and it'll turn off all the remastered assets and textures. And if you want the new textures and stuff, you can do it that way. So you get the best of both worlds and just go into it knowing that it's a little bit of a schizophrenic game. Some parts of it are just the remaster itself. Some things they gave a lot of attention to, and a lot of things they left exactly how it was in 1999. And I think it's worth playing. maybe wait for it on sale if you're not 100% sure. Or you could, if you're playing on PC, you can just do the old 48-hour Steam special, which you can play 2 hours and have it for 2 days and just return it for free, which I
Two
do
hours in
fairly
this game
often.
actually is like a because the game doesn't take like according to like how long to beat. It's not that long of a game. Like you'll get a good idea of how much like what this game
Yes.
is like in 2 hours.
You'll know whether you want to keep playing it in 2 hours or not. So, I would recommend it. It's a classic game, has a cult following for a reason. It's also integral to the, and I'm going to talk to Josh about the spoilers after. I don't want to spoil it for the episode, but the entire arc of the Legacy of Kain series is very, very cool and one of my favorite overarching narratives in all of gaming. So much that I have every few years, I'll get the itch and I'll go watch a new version of someone going over the entire series on YouTube or a new blog post or a new Reddit thread because I find the entire narrative really, really cool. And there's nothing quite like it in games, or excuse me, in movies or TV. And maybe down the road, if the remaster sells well enough, they'll remake some other or remaster other parts. I don't know, but it's a very important entry in the grand scheme of the series. And the grand scheme of the series is a really cool narrative. And at the very least, I would recommend going and finding a well done YouTube, one of those like YouTube historian where they go, they spend 6 hours and go over the whole series or something. I think it would be worth it because it's very, very cool. So that's my pitch. It'd be hard pressed to say, as Josh and I have mentioned a bunch of times, I was really excited when the remaster came out. As soon as I started playing it, it was like, oh yeah, this is 1999 under the hood still. Like they wrapped it in a fresh coat of paint, but it still plays like 1999. And some people don't mind that, but for me and Josh, that was it. It is pretty rough around the edges. So take it with a grain of salt.
All right, well that's our final thoughts on it. I wish I would have liked it more, but that it is what it is. So, Cade, thank you once again for joining me, man. This was a fun conversation. It did make me appreciate the game more. I will say that it made me appreciate the game a little bit more than when I was playing it. So, thank you for joining me on this episode and for coming back on the show. It's been too long. Always happy to have you back. So, for those who may not know you or know what you do, could you shout out, where can the good people find you and what would you like to promote?
If you type in gaming memories pod or gaming memories, I think on basically anything I should show up. Unfortunately, I did not master plan my brand, and gaming memories is taken everywhere, and gaming memories pod is too long for some platforms.
Oh,
So
jeez.
depending on which social platform you're on, I am some variation of gaming memories one or gaming memories pod one or so, but I have a link tree. So you could just go to the link tree and get to where you want. If you're interested in either a podcast where I have someone on, such as Josh himself, talk about the games that shaped them growing up. That is the framework in which I interview guests for my podcast. I have musicians, fellow podcasters, game devs, um, adult actors. I've had people from all over the place. So I interview people about the games that shaped them growing up. And then on social media and YouTube, I tinker with emulators and create guides on how to play old games with new twists and graphical touches. And then I occasionally create, like, I put out a video about a glitch in Ninja Gaiden Black 2 using a camera mod where all the special effects and blood would be in slow motion, but everything else was in normal speed, which turned out to be like one of the coolest fucking glitches I've ever seen in my life. And I made a whole video about it. So just sometimes I put out random stuff based on what I'm playing. If you're thinking, wow, that's such a weird random mix of content, that's because it is. Nothing's been master planned. It's just sort of been like, this seems interesting. Let me do that. I am not a professional like Josh. I put a podcast out whenever I feel like it. Sometimes it's every week, and sometimes I go months with nothing. So I'm just, that's what it is.
All right, everyone, please go check out Cade's stuff. It's a great podcast. A lot of friends that you might know from this show have been on his show as well, so it's definitely worth checking out. Yeah, I have a link in the show notes for the link tree that you mentioned. As for myself, you can follow me on social media at Still Loading Pod on most places, but I'm generally active on Blue Sky and Instagram. I'm also over on Twitch at Still Loading Pod, where I stream usually twice a week, but lately it's been more. I've been able to find time for editing in other places, so I've been able to find more time for streaming at night. So you can check me out over there. If you want to support the show, you can do so in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating or review on whichever podcasting app you use. That helps more people find the show, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I like feeling warm and fuzzy. And I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show over on Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you get all the episodes earlier with better audio quality, along with patron voting rights. You can help guide the direction of the show. I do quarterly polls, and I do other polls whenever the fuck I feel like it. Am I supposed to swear in my plugs? I don't know. But you can go patreon.com/stillloadingpod. That's all there for $1 a month. For $3 a month, you get everything I mentioned prior, plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month, you get all the stuff prior, plus 2 mini bonus episodes. And for $5 a month, you get everything in the previous tiers, plus access to my monthly movie podcast, which right now, what's going on is called Still Family, my monthly Fast and Furious movie podcast, where all the guests who join me aren't just friends, they're family. So if you would want to check that out, that's all over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. Lots of content over there for you. And if Fast and Furious isn't your thing, I did the entire James Bond movie series over there as well. And let me tell you, both with Still Family and the James Bond stuff, no episode is under 2.5 hours. They're all long as shit. So lots of content for just $5. So that's all over there. Patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But that's it. That's all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Cade, thank you once again for joining me.
No worries. Anytime.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.